Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Blood Moon Oracle. How are you guys doing tonight? I hope you are well. Tonight we are talking about EQ, aka also known as EI, emotional intelligence or emotional quotient. That's what we're talking about tonight. I almost felt like Spirit has been wanting me to elaborate on this subject. Um, it's not as common as you would think that it is, because I, for one, you know, never really understood that there was something like emotional intelligence. I've heard of IQ, which is um, intelligent quotient, where they measure your intelligence, but I've never really thought about the fact that you could measure emotion, right? Or that we can consider emotion and intelligence when actually it is one of the most evolved forms of intelligence. And so I wanted to talk about it tonight. What better way to learn than to teach it, to talk about it? And so that's what we're discussing tonight. Yes, yes, yes. EQ, emotional quotient, or also known as emotional intelligence, and how it impacts our lives and our well being, and how we can work to increase it. And I feel like increasing that will always be worth it. Okay. And so when we look at emotional intelligence, first of all, welcome, welcome, welcome to the station. My name is Leticia. And like, share, comment, subscribe. If you want to add something to what I am talking about and teaching, feel free to do that. And so when we look at emotional intelligence, there's a couple of different areas that really stick out and point to the bulk of what this is. And I found it's talking about being self-aware, being self-managed, being socially aware, and having your relationships managed as well. So let's talk about those four things really quickly. When we talk about self-awareness, basically what that means is being able to see, to identify what it is that you're feeling and what made you feel that way. It also means being able to sit with your feelings, what you're feeling, and being able to identify exactly how those feelings can cause you to act in a certain way, how it can actually affect your behavior. That's what it means to be self-aware. When we look at our ability to manage that, it's all about practicing the ways to relieve stress, right? We all know that life is sometimes unmanageable, if I could say that, hectic, sometimes chaotic, if we're just downright honest. There are some things, sometimes there's, the things that we can't avoid. And so this is all about being able to manage our stress levels and then being able to maintain how we look at things too, maintaining a positive perspective or outlook on life in any given situation, being able to manage ourselves under conditions that we are placed in or that we have to live by every day, whether we cause them or not. Being socially aware is being able to look around us and see, not only just see, but being able to take what we see and understand what that is emotionally. We're interpreting other people's emotions. Not only that, but also we're identifying with it. We're understanding it. We're showing empathy around what we're seeing, and we're open and willing to listen actively, right? It's not just immediately rushing to judgment about what we're seeing about a situation, but it's just being aware. Sometimes it's just seeing it, taking note, observing, and, being able to leave it at that. It doesn't always need a judgment, or it doesn't always need to make sense to us. But social awareness is being able to be aware of what's going on in our environment and whoever is surrounding us. When we look at managing relationships, we're looking at the fact that we live in a world where we have to connect with other people. Nobody's an island, though some of us want to be. We're not. And so being able to communicate effectively and clearly and sometimes assertively when it comes to what we need to say, or when it comes to us, right? It's all about expressing ourselves, especially when conflict arises, that becomes very important, being able to handle that conflict and resolve it respectfully. You won't always agree. That's a given. And everybody won't always agree with us. We won't always agree with them, but it's about coming to a resolution, right? That is, peaceable, respectable, maybe even beneficial for everybody. It's about coming to terms with what needs to happen with the connections, right? It doesn't always have to be agreeable. Relationship management, there's a way to connect, right? That's what it is. And it's also understanding that we are all in need of continuous improvement. It's understanding that we're all growing. Nobody has arrived. There's always one thing, spiritually, emotionally, that I like to refer to. And it's something kind of like having what I would call a heart check. And what that means is ever so often I will take time to go within, especially as it pertains to conflict. That's my first place. I go within. And I check with myself to see how I'm feeling, how I'm relating through these feelings outwardly in the world and to those around me. Do I need to reframe my perspective? Do I need to analyze it? Maybe arrive at a more effective perspective, right? It's all about going within and asking the questions of ourselves, what we're experiencing. It's understanding that we don't need to make excuses for what we're feeling, but we do need to acknowledge and do like regular assessments, if I could call it that. I call it heart checks. But these are all about improving our emotional intelligence skills. It's a skill that we can definitely build and work on, sharpen and strengthen. And then also being willing to take those opportunities that will cause us to throw ourselves on the training field to be able to develop these skills. Not just assessing, but also acting in ways that will open us up to opportunities for us to practice these skills. We have to actually experience and do it in order for us to grow or experience any benefit from it. This could be in any part of our life. We could be talking about career. We could be talking about relationships. We could be talking about family, right? We could be talking about social settings. And I like to point to the fact that nothing is limited anymore. We have the World Wide Web that allows us to connect to massive amounts of people in the drop of a dime. And so these are things that we're talking about that is, it's definitely something that is needed right now when we look at what's happening in the world and how, when it comes to connection, things are so chaotic, from every angle. There is something to discern with our connections, and it requires emotional intelligence because you can't just react to everything. That's not even wise. There has to be some type of method of wisdom that we operate in. And emotional intelligence is one thing that's coming up for me. And it's important to me because, as I said, I didn't even realize it was a thing, but it makes so much sense now that it's put in words and I'm able to look at, obviously someone did this study and came up with these different, perceptions around emotional intelligence. Someone coined the word, but it makes sense to me, especially as I look back and I see ways that I could have dealt with situations differently, right? So emotional intelligence it's a thing, y'all. 95% of people think they're self-aware when in reality, only 10 to 15% actually are. That's a huge gap. 95 think they're self-aware when only 10 to 15 actually are. And so to open up the can of worms a little bit more, when we look specifically, when we're talking about having relationship management, when we look at the idea around relationship management specifically, I want to come back to that when it comes to emotional intelligence in context of our connections and our relationships, how we manage those and how we respond to other people's emotions and how we show up in those moments. Being emotionally intelligent really helps us to strengthen our own communications and deepen our empathy. There'll be plenty of times when we find ourselves in situations where there's things about it that we can't change. In those moments, I feel like emotional intelligence shows up as just a easy way or a reminder of sometimes all we need to do is just be present. We don't have to do anything. We just have to have like good listening skills, being present without jumping in to try to fix a situation or have a certain reaction. Sometimes it's just being present that's most effective. Other times, emotional intelligence asks us to adjust how we communicate so that the connection or this thing, this collaboration can thrive and move forward. I feel like it's less about controlling the moment and more about supporting the connection or the outcome of what we're hoping to achieve. These are the kinds of skills that make, a plan work, a team work. Even if you're in a position of leading people, like these types of things will be like effective tools that can increase our success in helping us reach our desired goals and offer things like simple things, smoother or conversations that are more significant and meaningful, more deep conversations. And so I just want to take a quicker look like what it really means to be emotionally intelligent and how these ideas can help us show up better for ourselves and for others, right? That's what this is about, learning and finding ways to show up better for ourselves and for others, okay? So as we look at it, I feel like there are going to definitely be moments that we can't control, situations that can't be changed. There'll be things that we have to accept, even when they don't really match how we would like to do something or how we would do it, right? Oh, if that was me, this is how I would do it, right? Sometimes we are placed in situations and we're locked in. We don't have a choice in the matter. But we can choose how we show up. And that's what we are talking about, like operating out of the part of these situations where we do have a sense of control or power. This part of emotional intelligence is really about learning how to accept differences, basically, is what we're saying here. It's recognizing that people have their own thinking, their own ways of communicating, and they even have, their own ways of existing. And sometimes our position in that, our job in that is just simply to acknowledge it without trying to force or fix, right? Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, ain't it? Because everything in us tells us to fix, or do something, offer something, but sometimes we're just called to just be present, maybe just to listen. When we talk about emotional intelligence, a big part of it is learning to appreciate the uniqueness, the unique perspectives, the unique strengths, and other things that are unique that people bring. Everybody shows up with their own mix of skills. Some we share, and some of it we probably never will share. But that's what creates real diversity and richness in our connections, in our experiences, in our groups. There's real value being able to accept and honor differences that are among us. Practicing empathy is another key component. It's about supporting and strengthening the connections, that the ones that we feel like we belong in. I'm a huge believer in the golden rule, do unto others as you want them to do unto you. Treat others the way that you want to be treated. Not only stopping there, I even go so far as to say, see others the way that they would like to be seen. There's nothing more tactful than that. And seeing people that the way that they want to be seen, it carries so much power. And when we show genuine interest in how someone else feels or what they're experiencing, that's like an intentional empathy in action. And it's how we build trust with one another and deepen that understanding of another person and create connections that feel very meaningful. They could feel very supportive. Yeah. And so one of those ways that I mentioned was just kind of being present, actively listening. It's really just about being fully there, being present in the conversation, not just hearing words. Okay. It's also letting yourself be curious and engaged and aware of what's happening, even inside you as you're listening. When you're truly tuned in, when I'm truly tuned into a conversation, I can't wait to ask questions. And I have to hold myself back because sometimes my eagerness and my curiosity overrides my listening. So this is something that I definitely find that I have to, and I'm practicing it. I'm multitasking. I don't know if anybody else experiences that. When I'm engaged in a good conversation, like I have my own conversation on the sideline and my questions are forming because I am pulling in and I'm dissecting this information and I'm really engaging with it, like on a deep level, which is a good sign. But for me, sometimes that can also play as a distraction because I can easily get pulled away from the conversation and I'm all over here. But it means that you're processing what the other person is saying and connecting with it. Active listening also means paying attention to more than just verbal messages. You're also noticing body language, eye contact, tones, those subtle cues that tell you what's really going on. You could even take it a step deeper and check in with your own internal responses, right? Look into those deeper senses that we have. What are you feeling as this person speaks? What signs are you picking up? Are you sensing any unspoken emotions or shifts in energy? All of this is part of active listening. When we practice this, we create stronger, more productive relationships and connections because we make people feel seen. Have you ever sat down and talked to somebody and you just felt like you were just totally just seen and completely understood, right? That's the type of effect that we have when we allow ourselves to sink into active listening to this degree. We can also adapt other body language. We can adapt other things too, like looking at the posture, like having an open posture or nodding or leaning in slightly, like you are, really anticipating the next part of what they have to say. Like there's so many different things that we can do to show that we are engaged and listening attentively that heightens the connection to just simply being still. And looking like we're listening. There's just so much more that we can add to the activity of actively engaging. And then being flexible with different communication styles also helps us to connect with people who express themselves differently than we do. All of them are definitely things that we can adjust very easily to change the whole energy of a conversation. We can adjust the tone. We can adjust our body language. We can adjust our presence. Yes, you can. All of those are part of very strong, productive relationships. I feel like that's the kind of connection that strong relationships have. There is a strong connection that's built through communication. When we talk about emotional intelligence, this is exactly what we're talking about, tapping into these skills intentionally to support the connection and make communication flow more easily, right? When you find people that find it easy to talk to you, that's probably why, because you've given them what they need. on the other side of the conversation, your attention, in more ways than one, or there's something that tapped into them connecting with you, right? But it may be something intentional, it may not be, but there's different skills that we can use to activate those things. Another piece of emotional intelligence is learning how to adapt the way we communicate. And that just basically means adjusting how you show up based on what the moment, what the connection needs at that time. Sometimes that means having a softer tone, as we were just talking about, when someone is sharing something, sensitive, little shifts like slowing down and lowering your voice or adding more gentle warmth to your voice can all be signs of empathy and making the conversation feel better. And I have this little thing that I do when I try to grab someone that I'm talking to. I have a way of curving the endings of my words or to kind of grab them, or I can leave my words open at the end. And it's almost like an invitation. I don't know where I picked that up from, but I have a tendency to do that. Some of my go-tos are the tilt of the head or engaging with the eyes, like the very pupils of the eyes. I try to make contact to your soul. Like when I want to engage and conversate, you can tell a lot about people when you're talking, how they engage with you, right? And so those are just a couple of things of adjustments. Those are examples that I wanted to use. And so we can also give feedback as well, right? Active listening is, taking in, but part of communication is, of course, giving out. We're used to giving, but we need to practice more, I think. For me, let me just speak for me. I benefit a lot on focusing with the intake, the listening part. All those different things that I mentioned, it's like multitasking for me because I have such an active imagination and mind. It's heavy work for me, right? But nevertheless, I do it. But we can also give feedback based on what we're hearing and what we've experienced in the conversation. And that might look like, I don't know, maybe asking questions or reflecting something back. What I heard you say was, let me make sure that this was right. Reflecting things back or sharing input in ways that are helpful. Helpful is the key word, right? The goal isn't just to share or just to give, feedback or advice, but it's to really be constructive and meaningful in the response. If someone is sharing a problem, your feedback might gently point towards a possible solution or a new way of looking at things, right? Approaching conversations this way, I feel like adds value to the interaction, and it also could possibly create bonds and deepen the connection. That's huge. I think we have learned for some reason that is not as important as it is. This is huge, right? The response from people is one of an enigma, how people will respond to someone actually giving them their attention. But approaching a conversation, as I said this way, it definitely will strengthen the interaction and give it depth, and then also deepen the bonds of that connection. I feel like it's just another way emotional intelligence can appear by choosing to be constructive and deep and supportive rather than just reactive. We can also take time to really analyze, right? Part of that was being aware socially, not just self-aware, but also being aware. And remember, awareness is not just existing, but what's happening internally, what's taking place, or how is the emotional state causing things to move forward. And we can also do that with our connections. I feel like it's a good thing to analyze our environment including our relationships, our connections. That means being willing to step back and looking at the connections, looking at the environments as a whole, asking ourselves what's working, what's not, whether these situations are actually adding something of value, something meaningful. Is it productive? Is it healthy? Is it something positive being created from this? Right? This is the kind of reflection that's important because sometimes we realize we're pouring a lot of energy into connections or areas of our life that doesn't actually need what we're pouring in. Mhm. Meanwhile, there's other things that could use that energy or that support that is lacking. And so this kind of um, assessment is very beneficial. It's very beneficial. And when we pause to do the assessment, what's happening is we can redirect our energy in ways that we feel more aligned and that may be more beneficial. Being willing to sit down and evaluate our connections, our situations, that's a skill. It is. It doesn't sound like one, but it is. And it's one that will help you use your emotional intelligence more intentionally and more effectively. Okay. And honestly, just being kind too. I think that's a big one that's overlooked as well. Being kind, polite goes a long way, right? Simple friendliness and politeness can really shift the energy of the room or the connection. One thing that's really important to me is names because I know how I am about mine. Like I've gone my whole life having my name being mispronounced and people just, oh, whatever. I'm not going to take. And so for me, I've learned to really value names. So I'm going to really work really hard. Number one, to remember your name. And number two, to pronounce it right. The pronunciation is big. And it shows a person that you are taking time and that they matter, right? Pronouncing their name, even asking them, is that the right way? Okay, is that okay? Is that what you like to be called? Like I've spent so much of my life having to correct people that still didn't get it. Teachers, bosses, family. People just say it and then move on like it didn't matter. So I pick that up as something that I will use to make a difference. I make it a point to learn names and to say them the right way. It's a small gesture, but it's about showing respect and it builds connection in a very meaningful way, I found. Simple things like smiling, being respectful, courteous, offering small moments of warmth, those things matter too. And when it comes to building trust, it's about deciding who you want to be known as. What energy do you bring to a room? And what kind of presence do you want people to associate with you? All of this helps to ease some of the social tensions we feel right now. And anything to do with the group setting, this is stuff that matters, from going to work to going to church to logging online to going to the store to going to play bingo. Like it all matters. It creates a more conducive, a more graceful atmosphere, especially when we are having to work with people. Sometimes you would rather not be in a room full of people. It's more comfortable to work at home. Nevertheless, you got to do what you got to do, right? But it creates a more graceful environment, right? And you have the opportunity to share space with others and build sometimes relationships that are a surprise. You never know who you are around or who you're associated with. You just never know. Some of us entertain angels unaware. But these are just a few practices that we can learn and lean into as we work on strengthening our emotional intelligence and showing up with intention. Okay. So we know now what emotional intelligence is. It's really about recognizing, it's about understanding, and it's also about working with, managing our emotions, both our own and other people's. But the real question is, how do you actually use that in everyday life? What does that look like practically? Um, Maybe on the job, or what does that look like within your relationships, right? Practically, what does emotional intelligence looks like? What does it look like if we're going to use them, right, effectively? And so I was talking about the person who coined this, and there's some credit being given to a psychologist, and his name is John Mayer. He's one of the leaders, the thought leaders around this field. And he had a lot to do with the breakthrough of this perception around emotional quotient, or instead of IQ, EQ. And he's the one that developed these four main areas that we just talked about. The first one being perceiving emotions, basically being able to notice what you're feeling and what others are feeling too, right? And so when we think about this practically, say there was someone named Deja, right? Deja, is very good at picking up on emotions. She's very empathic, and she just has a good feel for people, and the energy. And so when she's in group settings, say she's at work, or maybe she's within some type of group and she's doing something creative, because she understands her own emotional signals, she's better at managing them, right? To be aware is to be empowered. When we understand what we're feeling and we give it our attention and we study ourselves and we become familiar, we get better at managing them. So Deja is good because she has been practicing using her emotions, but that's also helpful for Deja to move forward in her career, because when she does get herself in situations where she gets upset, it happens, right? And she has to choose between having a unproductive conversation versus meeting her goals, right? She's learned when the time comes where she needs to step back and take a breather, take a moment and come back to herself, and then allow herself to come back around when she feels more like she's in a position to have a calm discussion, right? It's just that simple, right? It keeps her head out of unnecessary conflict and helps her to avoid being labeled as, whatever they would label her as, power tripping or difficult. But not only that, Deja has also been able to tune into others' emotions, right? And so when she's talking with people, and maybe she's talking about something good, maybe it's not so good, maybe it's something that's a mixture of both, she watches people and their expressions and their reactions, and that awareness gives her a bit of a stronger edge for communication, and also could help her to tap into ways to what is the word, in situations where she might be trying to win or get something done, that might give her a little bit more information on how to go about and do that. Maybe negotiate, right? That's the word I was looking for, to better negotiate, being that she's aware. Here's another advantage. Think of this one. Deja can spot when someone's excitement or enthusiasm is pretense. She's good at spotting masks. And so that could help her in certain situations. Maybe if she's in a position of leadership, it helps her to better choose, because she's able to see who's genuine and when it comes to the excitement that they're showing, and who's just putting on, a facade. And so there's many different ways that we could practically utilize emotional intelligence that would help us to get whatever it is that we need to be done. It could be concerning work, a job, it could be concerning relationships, running a household, whatever it is that we have committed to, whoever it is that we are around. These things are beneficial when it comes to tapping into these skills, okay? And as a tool, emotional intelligence isn't just about noticing feelings or renaming how we have perceived our experience. It's also about using those emotions in ways that actually help us and possibly even the people around us as well, and maybe get us closer to our goal. Maybe there's a common goal in mind. It would help that to move forward faster. There won't be so many things that stand in the way. Because anytime you have people, listen, I don't care if you are in the most holiest of holies, there's going to be some conflict if it's a bunch of people gathered together. But in those cases, emotional intelligence helps you to navigate conflict and things that might come up so that you can many times get to what it is that you're trying to get to or accomplish what you need to accomplish. The emotional influences influence people's decisions. We know that for a fact, right? Our emotions manipulate our decisions, very much so. And that's why mindset, how we're thinking about these things, is going to be the biggest thing that matters, more than we actually realize, right? Think about it. If we're about to dive into something that we've been wanting to do that needs our attention, maybe it's a project of some kind, and we know that we usually will do our best work when we're calm, when we're focused, when we are on point, feeling good. But take the opposite scenario. We're stressed out, overworked, distracted, frustrated, surrounded by chaos and drama. Mistakes are guaranteed to happen. Same goes for people that are being held to high responsibilities, right? When we bring positive energy to the picture, we get a positive result, right? You're stepping into a room of people, and we want to feel relaxed, right? We want to feel warm. We want to feel welcomed. And there's something about bringing a good energy that helps that to happen. Everybody being responsible for themselves, everybody being aware of themselves, what they're bringing can be very, very beneficial, right? Even in situations where that's not the case, like you could actually kind of work with that energy to turn it around. Say you walk into a room and things feel stiff and stifled, right? And then you bust a joke because you sense or you can see that it's going to be kind of like a stuffy kind of moment. So you bust a joke, everybody laughs, it lightens up the energy, right? Using emotions as a tool. So you just turned that sticky, stuffy energy by busting a joke, making everybody laugh. You just lifted the energy of the room, right? Because you were able to see and emotionally tap in and use emotions as a tool to shift the energy of the room. And especially when you are looking to get a certain result, right? That even becomes more important and even more effective, because then you not only lighten the energy in the room, now you're able to operate and do what you've come to do. And if that was to maybe set something in motion or get things going, right? Hey, we in the game. There's also another psychologist that her name was Alice Eisen. She was doing a little bit of studying around this as well. And she found that even doctors, when they're in a good mood, their diagnosis of their patients are different. Now that's crazy, right? Because they took time to slow down, because the doctors took time to connect and to really listen, like it changed the prognosis that the doctor gave. That's crazy. That same principle applies at home. That same principle applies at work. It applies in other social situations as well. When we feel good, content, when we feel motivated and grounded, we naturally show up in our very best selves. And we show up better in the spaces where we are, whether that's walking into, coming home from work, coming into a room and you haven't seen your hubby or your wife all day, stepping into the store, serving customers, like it works. being aware emotionally and realizing that we can actually use emotions as a tool. Even with customers, it works. I can't tell you how many times I've had to deal with an angry, frustrated, irate customer. And I tend to have a very smooth disposition naturally, so I don't have to really do a lot. And if I'm lucky, if I'm able to utilize the tools of emotion, I can turn that anger, if I have the necessary tools to solve the problem too, I can turn that anger into something a whole lot different. I've had people like almost cussing me out when they first come in for customer service, and by the time they're leaving, they're apologizing and pretty much like kissing the ground that I walk on. Not only because I fixed their problem, but also because I maintain a very positive, receptive, helpful energy through the interaction. And that wasn't even anybody that I knew. That was just a random person. Imagine how effective that would be in our own lives. Emotional intelligence is one that I feel like is, right now it's a jewel. It's a jewel. I don't know where everybody else would fare on this. This is probably going to be something that we would ask ourselves and really be honest with ourselves. Like, how aware are you? Because like I was saying, it is said about 95% of people believe that they are aware of themselves, but in reality, they're not. They think they are. But 10 to 15% are actually really aware of themselves. So what is the other 70 to 75%? Where, right? There's a miss. And so before we go to jump to do anything, I feel like this is something that we can kind of put to the test, whether it's a big thing or a small thing. Like and that's why presence is so sweet as well. Totally different day, just jumping out of bed, getting dressed, showering, going to get something to eat and running to work, as opposed to getting up about an hour early and sitting down and just being still and allowing yourself to be present before you actually engage with the day. Totally different experiences, right? And so it's worth it to pause, to stop and take a moment to ask ourselves, am I in the right headspace to do my best living today, to do my best work today, to do my best, whatever it is that you're doing that day? To stop and ask yourself, to be aware, tap into your own awareness. That quick check-in can make all the difference, especially if you are someone that is playing important roles for other people. Emotional control becomes something that you cannot live without. It's essential, especially when things get tough and you're the one responsible. There's some big deadline you were supposed to meet or something that you were supposed to do, you promised to do. Like, your attitude sets the tone for how that ends up. You're steady. And even if it's leading or being responsible for others, like, they're watching you. And your attitude says it all. It sets the tone. Your steady, positive energy can actually be something that keeps you pushing through, and that actually could encourage other people too and cause them to trust you more. And so there's just so much that emotional intelligence, it's beautiful. And to think of it in this way makes so much more sense. I've heard that term coined many different times, many places, but to take a deeper look at what that is really and how we can use that to our advantage in our own lives, and maybe even to affect the lives of those around us, or even at the least to connect better with those around us. And when we look at some of the issues that we're dealing with, like DM, all these different social stressors that we have to deal with within our society right now, this might be something like very small, but it's huge. It has huge ramifications. It has huge, implications for those that would become aware. Because not only does it position us to take responsibility for our actions, but it also empowers us to step into that moment and to possibly make a more conscious decision, if I could say that. Yeah. And so I don't know why Spirit wanted me to talk about this today, but here I am talking about it. Um, I wonder where that would fit in the energy body, emotional intelligence. Would that be in the heart space, or would that be in the crown, or anywhere in between there? Is it in all of them? Um, because it's kind of a mixture between the crown and the heart. And so I guess it could be anywhere in between there, or it could be all of that, it could be all of that. Because we're talking about self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and then relationship management. And so, yeah, there's just a lot involved there, a lot involved there. And so, maybe this would be beneficial for somebody. I don't know. It was definitely beneficial for me. I got a lot out of it. If you want to learn something, talk about it. Okay. You'll learn it if you talk about it. And so I hope this is helpful, and it, at the least, maybe shed some light. Maybe you never heard of the term emotional intelligence. Well, maybe this gives you a different perspective on how you can show up and how you can be empowered in your own life. Okay. Maybe this is like a setup to lead me into this discussion around the book that we will be discussing, Spiritual Hygiene. I feel like I may need to do little discussions like this just to enlighten, because we take for granted sometimes when we get on here and we're talking a certain language, not everybody understands what we're talking about, and so how you can be within certain groups, and unless you're within that group, some of the language is foreign, right? When I say portal, right, someone that does not know what that means may exact it to mean something that's like way in left field, as opposed to somebody who is from the same thought, community, right, that I am in. They might understand that in a whole different light. And so I don't know, maybe this can be helpful. I do feel like truth is truth. And a lot of truth spreads over a wide variety of thought, of philosophy, of theology. Like truth does not need to be proven. It stands alone. And so no matter how it comes out, it comes out. No matter who it comes through, it comes out. And so I feel like I will be doing a lot of these, just maybe on different highlights that's important to understand what we're talking about, as we're talking about this book from Iyanla Vanzant. And so this is what I'm talking about tonight. I don't know, maybe that's something that we will discuss within that, within this work of art that she has put together for healing the nations, right? Yes. And so that's what I have tonight. Thank you guys for stopping and watching. I hope I've said something that is encouraging, that has taught you something that's inspirational. And so let me know if you have questions, because questions are good and we are all learning. You asking questions may be something that I didn't even think about, that might even widen my understanding or my perspective. And so if you have questions, don't hold back, ask. You can email me too. And so I'm going to go ahead and end it here. Thank you so much for stopping by. It has been a pleasure talking to y'all again, and I will see you very, very soon. All right. Have a good evening. Bye. This is also good too, because today is Valentine's Day. And sometimes we get, I don't know, what is Valentine's Day about? Chocolate, roses, connection, maybe emotional intelligence, right? And so maybe this hits home for Valentine's Day too. Talk to you guys later. My name's Leticia.